Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card video. I have 3 cards. They're all the same, but I use a different coloring medium in the background. One is color burst powders, one is Peerless watercolors, and the last one is Zig watercolor markers. So here is the die I'm using. It's called Sensational Snowflake Collage. And I'm going to show you 2 of them here. The first I'm going to show you is the Peerless watercolors. So I'm going to spritz some water onto some Strathmore watercolor paper. This is 90 pound. And I have kind of a pretty large brush with a pointy tip. And I've got some Christmas colors. I'm just going to speed this up here. I'm going to layer it a little bit, but I'm not going to let it dry in between. I'm just going to do it while it's wet. And I'll do the red and then I'll blend in with a little pink. And I'm just going back and forth. Now I'm being really careful not to blend too much between the pink and the green because those colors don't really go together very well. So I'm just going to be really careful when it comes to that. All right, so that's all I'm going to do here. I'm going to let that dry. Now for the Zig one, I'm going to just color in with the marker. So I kind of started thinking I was going to do the same thing I did with the Peerless, which is kind of sections of color, but then I decided to make it more random. So I have 3 different markers here and I'm just coloring them randomly. Now you can see they look pretty like faded. It looks like there's not a whole lot of ink in my pen, but that's because I'm going fast and the paper is textured. So I'm just kind of laying down some color quickly. You don't need much because the color is pretty concentrated. Okay, so now I'm going to spritz this with water and I'm going to use quite a bit of water. So I'm just going to spray, and as soon as you kind of see the white areas going away, then you know you have plenty of water. So I'm going to let that kind of soak a little bit, and then you can see it starts to pool on the sides. And my cardstock is curling a little bit, which is fine with me because then it kind of gets that extra water on the sides. So I just take a tissue and just kind of wipe it up a little bit just on the very edge. I don't want to touch too much color because it'll remove the color, but if I leave that water there, it'll start creeping back toward the middle. Okay, so while that dries, I'm going to take my die, put it on a piece of Neenah cardstock, and then I'm going to take a black strip and I'm going to cut it right over the second from the bottom. Now I've oversized the paper a little bit so that I have a little bit of wiggle room just in case I mess up the cut. Now I put that on top so I knew where I was going to cut it, and then I put the die exactly where it was. Now I'm going to put my tape on the left side because I'm going to be embossing on the right side, and sometimes the powder sticks to where the surgical tape was. Now I'm going to cut a little bit on the top and the bottom, so I have about probably less than 1/8 of an inch on the top and the bottom that it goes kind of up and down to the next square. And then I cut off those little excess snowflake pieces. My sentiment is from the Merry Messages set by Lawn Fawn. It's one of my favorite Christmas sentiment sets. It's got some great ones in it. And I'm going to ink it up with some Versamark ink, and then I'm put some powder on it. But something happened here and it was a big mess. There was powder everywhere. I'm not sure. There must have been some Versamark on there, and so I tried to brush it off a little bit, but it was so inside all the different letters. I'm like, oh, forget it. So I wiped off the whole thing with this brush, just to make sure there's nothing left. And then I took a heat gun and I heated up. And this is kind of on the chance that it's the Versamark that's on there and it's extra. So if I dry it, then the powder won't stick to it anymore. So now that it's dry, I'm going to try again. I also inked it up, by the way, again with the Versamark ink, and I had it in my Misty, so it was easy to stamp again. And this time it was perfect, so I heated up, and now I've got my sentiment. Now I'm going to adhere this to the Neenah piece. I'm going to put some ATG tape runner on the back of the large areas, and I'll just put some 2-way glue on the back of the snowflake and place it right there on top of the second from the bottom snowflake box. And then I had some extra on the outside, so I just cut that off with a scissor. I need to cut one more snowflake, so that second from the bottom, I'm going to cut that one out from some Neenah cardstock. And then I'm going to ink up that whole thing with some Versamark ink. I'm just going to put some scratch paper underneath. And then I'm going to sprinkle it with some sparkling snow embossing powder. It's this glittery white powder. It's so pretty. It looks like sparkling snow. And then I'm just going to cut out the snowflake with a scissor, and I'm going to add that to my card in the last step. Now that my watercolor panels have dried, I'm going to take some white Gonzai Tombi paint, and I'm going to splatter. You can see I didn't have enough paint, so if you're not getting any coming out or any splatters, you don't have enough, water is what I meant. So I'm going to pick up some more water, and you can see suddenly that I'll get a ton of splatters when I add some more water. And I usually use the Gonzai Tombi because it seems to be the most opaque, although it does fade a little bit, and I'm going to add some more dots with a gel pen later. So here are all my pieces for the two cards. I'm going to flip over my panel and put some Scotch foam tape on the back. And then I found that putting the watercolor piece on top of it was the best way to do it. So I wanted it to be as close to the right as possible, which is why it's hanging off the edge. But I cut it a little larger than I needed so that I would have some space to place it where I want. And so I'm just going to take a scissor, I'll put it in between there with the Scotch foam and just cut off the excess. And then I'll put some tape runner on the back of the watercolor piece, and I'll adhere this to a Nina Solar White card base. And then I can add that sparkly snowflake. I'm just going to put some two-way glue on the back and place it right there on top. And then I'm going to put an acrylic block on it to hold it because it is a little stiff because of the embossing powder. So I'll put that off to the side and finish off the other card. So I'm going to put that watercolor panel on the back after I put some Scotch foam tape. And then I'll put the tape runner on the back of it and put it on a card base, and then again add this last snowflake, this sparkly one. And then lastly, I'm going to take my white gel pen and I'm just going to add some dots here and there to all of these different boxes for this card, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the other card. And it really did add that kind of little bit of snow to the background. And those are my 3 cards for today. So the last one that I did that's not in the video is the color burst powders, and I've used those many times before. I just used the blue and the purple ones. Here's the card right here, and it looks more of a galaxy sort of in the back, I think. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.